The morning of my 68th birthday, I woke up before anyone else in the house. That had been my habit for 40 years. Coffee at 5:30, standing at whatever window faced east, watching the sky change color before the world started making noise. In the house I built, it was the kitchen window that faced east. In my son's house, where I had been living for the past 2.5 years, it was a small bathroom window at the end of the hallway. I would stand there in the dark with my mug, looking out at the neighbor's fence, and remind myself that this was temporary, that I was here because my family needed me. That was what my son Kevin told me when he called 3 years ago. His wife, Diane, had just gone back to work after their second child, and childcare costs were eating them alive. $4,000 a month for 2 kids under 5. Kevin said they were drowning. He said he didn't know who else to ask. I had retired 8 months earlier from 31 years as a civil engineer. I had a pension. I had savings. I had a house that was paid off in a town I had lived in since my boys were in elementary school. I had a garden I tended every spring and a neighbor named Harold who came over on Sundays to watch football and argue about things that didn't matter. I had a life, a quiet one, but mine. I sold the house in 11 days. The market was good. I walked away with enough to feel secure and moved my furniture into a storage unit, my clothes into Kevin's guest room, and my mornings into that narrow hallway facing the neighbor's fence. For 2 years and 7 months, I was there every day. I drove my grandchildren to preschool and then to kindergarten. I picked them up. I took the older one, Mason, to his swim lessons on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I took the little one, Sophie, to her speech therapy appointments on Fridays. I cooked dinner 3 nights a week because Diane got home late on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I fixed the garage door twice, repainted the back bedroom, and spent an entire weekend in October helping Kevin build a storage shed that he had bought in a box and then left in the garage for 4 months because he didn't have time. I didn't ask for anything in return. That wasn't why I came. I came because Kevin said he needed me, and because Mason and Sophie were the best things that had happened to me since their father was born, and because standing at a bathroom window in someone else's house was a price I was willing to pay to be useful. I thought Kevin understood that. I found out on my birthday that he didn't. The party was Diane's idea, or at least that was how Kevin described it when he mentioned it to me in passing about 2 weeks before. A Saturday evening dinner, some of their friends, her parents, her brother, and his wife. He said it almost the way you mention a dentist appointment, casually, like he was checking a box. I asked if I should make my chili. I had been making it since Kevin was 12. It had been at every family gathering for 25 years. He said, sure, that would be great, and then went back to whatever he was doing on his phone. I made the chili. A full pot, the real version, the one that takes 4 hours and uses dried chilies I had to drive 40 minutes to find at a specialty grocery store because the ones at the regular supermarket were never right. I made cornbread from scratch. I bought a decent bottle of bourbon because Kevin's father-in-law, Richard, liked bourbon and I thought it would be a nice gesture. The night of the party, I got dressed and came downstairs at 6, which was when Kevin had said people were arriving. The house was already full. Diane's parents were there, Richard and Carol, her brother, Mitchell, and his wife, Tanya. 3 couples I recognized as Kevin and Diane's friends from the neighborhood. A woman I didn't know who turned out to be Diane's co-worker. No one introduced me. I stood in my son's living room for 4 minutes. I counted, because after the first minute I started to notice that something was wrong, and after the second minute I started to understand what it was, and by the 4th minute I was certain. Kevin was across the room talking to Mitchell. He saw me. He raised his chin the way you acknowledge someone you sort of know from the gym. Then he went back to his conversation. Diane came out of the kitchen, looked at me, smiled the way you smile at someone who has just arrived to fix the cable, and said, "Oh, good, you made the chili. Can you set it up over on the side table?" Then she walked toward Carol and they hugged and laughed about something I wasn't close enough to hear. I set the chili on the side table. I stood near it for a while. People helped themselves and said things like, "Oh, this is amazing," to the general room without looking for whoever made it. Richard poured himself a glass of the bourbon I had bought and thanked Kevin for having the good stuff. Kevin said thanks and did not correct him. At some point I found a chair near the window, a chair that had been pushed somewhat aside to make room for a rented cocktail table, and I sat in it. I sat there for almost an hour. Mason came and sat next to me for a while and showed me something on a tablet. That was the best part of the evening. When Diane noticed him there, she said, "Mason, go play with Sophie. The adults are talking," even though no adult had spoken to me in 40 minutes. After Mason left, I looked across the room at my son. He was laughing at something Mitchell said. He was relaxed. He was at ease in a way that meant he was not thinking about me at all, not wondering whether I was doing all right, not thinking that it was my birthday and I was sitting alone in a pushed-aside chair while people ate food I had cooked and drank bourbon I had paid for. I want to be honest about what happened inside me in that moment. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. Anger has heat. What I felt was more like the sensation you get when you reach for a railing in the dark and it isn't there. A sudden understanding of empty space where something solid was supposed to be. I had sold my house for this. I put down my plate, picked up my jacket from the hook near the front door, and walked out. I did not make a scene. I did not say anything to Kevin or Diane. I did not need to. There is a kind of statement that is made only by the absence of a person, and I had learned over 68 years that it tends to land harder than any words. I sat in my car in their driveway for about 10 minutes. I wasn't sure where I was going. I had a storage unit full of furniture and a pension check that arrived on the 15th and no house. I called my younger son. Daniel is 41, lives about 90 minutes away, works in logistics, married to a woman named Ruth, who has a laugh like a car alarm, and makes the best lasagna I have ever tasted. Daniel is not the son who needed me. He has always been steady in a way that meant he didn't call in crisis, which also meant I sometimes forgot to call him enough. He picked up on the second ring. I told him where I was. I told him what had happened, not dramatically, just the facts of the evening laid out in order. When I finished, there was a short silence, and then Daniel said, "Dad, get on the highway. Come here." I drove 90 minutes through the dark. When I pulled into Daniel's driveway, his kitchen light was on and Ruth was standing at the door. She had reheated lasagna. She had made coffee. She did not say anything pitying or complicated. She put the plate in front of me and sat down across the table and said, "Tell us everything." I stayed the night in their guest room, which had a window that faced east. In the morning, while Daniel made eggs, I thought about what I actually had. I had savings, a significant amount, because I had lived carefully for 40 years, and because the house sale had been good. I had a pension. I had, as it turned out, made a few quiet decisions in the months before that birthday party that I had not mentioned to Kevin, because at the time they had seemed like ordinary financial housekeeping and I had not thought I needed to explain my finances to my son. The first decision was about a piece of land I owned. I had bought it 20 years ago, 12 acres about 40 miles outside the town where I used to live, originally with the vague idea of building a weekend cabin someday. I never built the cabin. The land had just sat there appreciating while I forgot about it for years at a time. 6 months before my birthday, a developer had contacted me about purchasing it. I had negotiated carefully, taken my time, and signed the paperwork. The sale closed 3 weeks before that party. The second decision was about the storage unit. In the weeks after it became clear to me, without my quite being able to name it, that something in Kevin's house felt increasingly like a staff arrangement rather than a family one, I had begun quietly moving things out of storage and into a furnished apartment I had rented in Daniel's town. Not everything, just the things that mattered. My books, my father's watch collection, the kitchen equipment I actually used. The apartment had a month-to-month lease and a decent kitchen and a window that faced east. I had not told Kevin about any of this, because Kevin had not asked about my life in quite some time. 2 days after my birthday, I went back to Kevin's house to collect my remaining things. I went on a Tuesday morning when I knew Kevin would be at work and the kids would be at school. Diane was home. She opened the door and looked at me with an expression that had clearly been prepared in advance, a look of careful, mannered concern. She said she was glad I had come back, that Kevin had been worried, that they both felt terrible about how the evening had gone. I said, "I'm sure." She said they wanted to talk things through, that Kevin had been meaning to call, that things had just been so busy. I said I understood busy. I had been busy myself for 2 years and 7 months in this house. I said I was going to collect my things from the guest room and I would be out of their way. She said, "What do you mean, out of our way? You live here." I said, "I did." She followed me upstairs, still talking. She said the party hadn't meant anything, that it was just hard to manage that many people, that I had to understand how stressful hosting was. I said I did understand. I had cooked the chili and the cornbread and bought the bourbon, so I had some familiarity with the effort of the evening. She stopped following me after that. I loaded my car in 3 trips. What was left didn't take long. Clothes, a few books I hadn't yet moved, my shaving kit, the small framed photo of my wife that I kept on the nightstand. My wife, Eleanor, had been gone for 9 years. It was a photo from a camping trip we took when Kevin was 15 and Daniel was 12. She was laughing at something off camera. I had kept it on every nightstand I had slept next to since she died. I said goodbye to the house without saying it out loud, the way you close a chapter. Kevin called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. He said he heard I had taken my things and he didn't understand what was happening, that I was being dramatic, that he hoped I would calm down and call him back so they could sort this out. I listened to the voicemail twice. The word that stayed with me was dramatic, as if the transaction of the previous 2.5 years could be summarized as me having a feeling. I did not call back that day. What I did instead was call my attorney. I want to be precise here, because precision matters. I had not gone to Kevin's house with the intention of punishing him. I had not made any of my financial arrangements as a trap or a strategy. I had made them because I am 68 years old, and I have been a careful man my whole life, and careful men make arrangements. But there were a few things that needed to be looked at now that my living situation had changed, and an attorney was the right place to start. The first thing was the arrangement Kevin and I had about my car. 2 years earlier, when I moved in, Kevin had suggested I add my car to their insurance policy, said it would be cheaper on a family plan. I had done it without thinking much about it. Now that I was no longer living there, that arrangement needed to end. I had my car put on its own policy that afternoon. Kevin and Diane would see the adjustment on their next bill. The second thing was the recurring transfer. About 8 months after moving in, Kevin had mentioned that groceries had gotten expensive and asked if I could contribute something monthly, which I thought was reasonable. I had set up an automatic transfer of $800 a month to a joint account we created for household expenses. I had been making this transfer every month since. I stopped the transfer the morning after the birthday party and had simply not yet told Kevin because Kevin had not asked. He asked on Thursday. He called in the afternoon, voice different than it had been in the first voicemail, less dismissive. He said the grocery transfer hadn't come through and Diane had noticed, and was everything all right? I said everything was fine. I said I had stopped the transfer because I was no longer living in the house, and contributing to the groceries didn't seem to make sense under the circumstances. He was quiet for a moment. I said that while I had him, I also wanted to mention that I had been looking at the numbers from the past 2.5 years. The child care I had provided, based on the market rate for a full-time nanny in their area, came to somewhere in the range of $87,000. I was not asking for it. I was not interested in that kind of transaction with my son, but I thought he should have the number, so he understood what the past few years had represented. So when he used words like dramatic, he had some context. Another silence. He said, "Dad, I didn't know you were keeping track." I said I hadn't been. I had done the math last night for the first time, and I thought he should know. He said he and Diane had been under a lot of pressure. I said I knew. I had been there for it. He said things had just sort of shifted, and he knew that wasn't fair. He knew that. I said, "Kevin, I cooked your birthday chili and sat alone by the window for an hour. On my birthday, in a chair that had been pushed aside to make room for a cocktail table." He didn't say anything for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Younger, somehow. Like the voice he had when he was maybe 16 and had made a bad decision and knew it. He said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I think I don't know. I stopped seeing you." Those 4 words. I stopped seeing you. I have thought about them a lot since that phone call. About how a person can share a house with someone for years and slowly reclassify them. How it happens quietly and incrementally, and then one day you are setting up a cocktail table in front of their chair because you don't register that it's their chair. How it requires no malice. That might almost be the worst part. Kevin did not hate me. He had just, somewhere along the way, stopped seeing me as a person whose presence in the room mattered. Eleanor would have known how to talk to me about this better than I can talk about it myself. She was always the one who could name the shape of a thing. I told Kevin I needed some time. He said he understood. He asked where I was staying, and I told him Daniel's town. He said he was glad I had somewhere to go. I could tell that he meant it, and I could tell that the meaning of it was also a small revelation to him, that he was glad his father had somewhere to go, because somewhere in the preceding years he had stopped thinking about whether that was true. I let the weeks pass. I am not interested in the idea of Kevin suffering. I want to be clear about that. Some people hear a story like this and they want the accounting to be brutal. They want the son to lose his job and his house and stand in the rain understanding what he did wrong. That is not what I wanted. Kevin is not a bad man. He is a man who got comfortable and stopped paying attention. And those are not the same thing, even if they can produce similar damage. What I wanted was simpler. I wanted to be seen. In early spring, about 4 months after the birthday party, I drove to Kevin's house on a Sunday afternoon. I called ahead this time. He met me at the door. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had eaten 3 dinners a week for 2.5 years, and we talked for a long time. Mason climbed into my lap about 20 minutes in and fell asleep there, the way he used to when he was 2. Sophie brought me a drawing she had made, a greenhouse with a yellow sun, and said it was for my new apartment. I folded it carefully and put it in my shirt pocket. Kevin said he and Diane had started seeing a couples counselor. He said it had been Diane's idea, which surprised me. And then he said actually it hadn't entirely been her idea, which surprised me less. He said they had been talking about the ways they had let things slide. He didn't use the word me specifically, but the architecture of what he was saying was clear. I told him about the land sale, about the apartment, about the fact that my retirement was more comfortable than he probably realized, because I had always been a private person about money and had apparently been more private than was useful. He laughed a little at that, a surprised, slightly pained laugh. I told him I wasn't going away. I told him Mason and Sophie were not losing their grandfather over a bad birthday party. I told him that what I needed from him going forward was not anything extravagant, just to be seen, to be a person in the room, not a utility in the room. He said, "I know, Dad. I know that now." I believed him. Not entirely, not blindly, the way you might believe a person when you are 25 and everything still seems like it will always be the same. I believed him the way you believe someone at 68, which is with experience factored in, with the understanding that people change slowly and imperfectly, and that believing in someone is not the same as handing them something for free. I drive out to see Mason and Sophie most Sundays now. Sometimes I stay for dinner. Kevin and I have had more real conversations in the past 6 months than I think we had in the last 3 years. I lived in his house, which tells you something about what proximity without presence actually amounts to. My apartment has a second bedroom. I have put a small bookshelf in it and a comfortable chair, and Mason has already claimed it as the place where we do puzzles. He calls it the puzzle room with the seriousness of a child who has named something important. Some evenings I sit at my kitchen window with coffee and watch the sky go dark over the rooftops. I think about Eleanor. I think about the camping trip in the photograph, the way she was laughing at something I had said, something I can no longer remember. I think about all the things you don't know you're building until you look back and see them. I think about Mason asleep in my lap on a Sunday afternoon, and Sophie's green house with the yellow sun folded in my shirt pocket. I walked out of a birthday party that didn't see me. I came back with an apartment I chose for myself, a son who is learning to look again, and 2 grandchildren who will know, without any doubt, that their grandfather was never just a person in the background. The quiet exit is not the end of the story. Sometimes it is exactly where the story begins.